Okay, this is going to be the introduction to the thorax. So with any chest x-ray, you want to start with an initial survey, and primarily you're going to be looking for just general patterns of what you see, look for foreign bodies, etc. And then you want to walk through a relatively standardized process. So it doesn't really matter what order you go in, but you want to consider each one of these elements at some time when you're looking at the chest x-ray. So first off, you want to be looking at skeletal structures, be looking for any sort of abnormalities and for the normal structures that you'd expect with the chest wall, the clavicle, scapulae, etc. Then you want to look at the structures of the mediastinum, the hyla of the lungs and the pleura themselves, and then also the surrounding soft tissue for any abnormalities and for the normal appearance. And so we'll walk through all of this throughout this lecture. So with the initial survey, again, you want to be reading your film in a systematic way. And so what we mean by that is you're looking for certain things in the same order every single time so that you make sure you don't miss anything. And so again, we're looking for normal in this class, but we're going to use some abnormal examples in order to help you better appreciate or learn what the normal anatomy should look like. If available, you also want to check age and sex. Again, typically in this class, that's not something that's easily available on many of these images, but clinically that is something that you'd want to be keeping in mind. And then one of the really important things to be looking for is symmetry. So that's one of those early patterns that you can look for, as you should expect pretty much everything in the chest to be symmetrical with the exception of the heart. And so if you see any sort of asymmetry, that should automatically grab your attention, and that's an area that you want to look at. And then again, you also want to keep in mind that foreign bodies, foreign objects are frequently observed in the chest. So that could be external lines, it could be central catheters placed into the heart, through the great vessels. It could be bullets, knives, etc. So there's many different foreign objects that can appear that you want to make sure that you consider. Or somebody can get in the way when you're taking your x-ray. All right, so in terms of skeletal structures, the things that you want to keep in mind are the overall shape of the skeletal structures, the density of them. Again, we're not going to get too much into this topic in this course, but it is something to keep in mind. Fractures and lesions are another thing that you want to be looking for with skeletal structures, and then also the joints that are located in the thorax as well. And so just to remind us of our normal skeletal anatomy, so obviously we have our 12 ribs. We also have the sternum in the midline with the manubrium superiorly, the body, and then the xiphoid process inferiorly, which, keep in mind, the xiphoid process will eventually fully calcify, and the xiphosternal joint will become a calcified joint by about age 40. In addition to the ribs and the costal cartilages, we also have posteriorly, we can see the thoracic vertebrae. So remember, you have 12 thoracic vertebrae, each of which has a rib associated with it. And then we also have the scapula and the clavicle that are going to appear on a standard chest x-ray. So I'm just going to go over to our complete anatomy for just a moment, because what I want you to do is I want you to spend some time just looking at, appreciating on a three-dimensional model what the skeleton looks like, and look at the relationships between the bones. For example, looking anteriorly where the clavicles are coming across, you'll notice you can see where it's going to articulate with the manubrium. So you can appreciate the sternoclavicular joint, which you can see right here. So you should be able to easily see the heads of the clavicles on a chest x-ray, but also notice the spinal level that these are located at. So if you look again sort of posteriorly, and you think about how an x-ray is going to be picking up all these different structures and then overlaying them, these 3D structures into a 2D projection. Again, you can see where the clavicles are coming across at approximately the level of the third rib, the third thoracic vertebra as well. So kind of keep that in mind. That can be a really useful landmark because, again, most of the time when we image the chest, it's done in a PA projection, and so as a result, you're going to get this sort of view. And so where you can see the clavicles coming across, again, you can see that you're about T2, T3 at that point. And again, to some degree, it depends, on here as to how the model is rotated. So if it's, I think this is approximately where you'd see it being straight. And so this is approximately what you'd see on imaging. And also notice the difference between posterior versus anterior ribs. So generally in the upper mid-thoracic region, the ribs are going to be roughly parallel with the ground, so they're approximately horizontal. And then as you move towards the inferior three to four, five ribs, you'll notice that they're all angled down towards the floor versus the upper ribs that are more in a horizontal position. And then remember that these ribs then are going to angle anterior-inferiorly as they wrap around the thoracic wall. And so keep that in mind, that when you're looking at the anterior ribs, you should expect them to have sort of this downward projection to them. And then also keep in mind the scapulae are going to play a major role in obscuring several of the lateral aspects of the upper ribs as well. So again, I think it behooves you to go through and just appreciate the skeletal anatomy before you jump into looking at too many of these images. So again, just to remind us of the thoracic cage, so you have 7 true, 3 false, and 2 floating pairs of ribs with the costal cartilages anteriorly that are unossified and therefore are going to appear somewhat lighter on X-ray imaging. We have our sternum, which is comprised of 3 parts. So you have the manubrium, body, and then the xiphoid process at the inferior most aspect of it. And then we have in terms of fracturing of ribs 4 through 9 is relatively common.